FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It is the 19th day of December 2016. Only 12 more days to go after this one. Hard to believe. And a new regime is just about set to go. Today is Electoral College Day, and it's foregone conclusion. Don't even waste your gray matter thinking about it. What I want to know, and person who's about to come on perhaps can answer, is why are we still cutting down forests for the legacy media to put ink on paper and burn up perhaps tens of millions, hundreds of millions of gallons of scarce oil every year to distribute these things? You know, also you can wrap your fish in it. I don't understand, but Chris Martenson, perhaps you have figured this out because I am scratching my head over it. Welcome back.
Thanks, Kerry. Good to be with you, all your listeners here right before the holidays. And listen, this is supposed to be the season of good cheer and gratitude and all of that. But here, let's just open up one last can of whoop ass on the media in this year of 2016. They have a failed business model at this point in time, and they know it. And all their numbers support the fact that their business model is failing. You look at the revenue numbers for all the big, the Gray Lady, the New York Times, Washington Post, all of them. They're just fading, right? And here's why. Because I think deep down, all of us know that propaganda should be free. Who wants to pay for that, right?
Yeah, like the best things in life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sunsets and propaganda, both free, right?
Yeah.
Because I refuse to pay to have, it's not true. I have one print media that comes to my house. It's the Wall Street Journal. It's really, it's my keeping my finger on the pulse of what they are thinking. But I have to be honest, for a person whose job it is to be an information scout and understand what's happening in the world, I spend a really small amount of time harvesting said information from the mainstream media because they become completely useless. And here's how useless. I have a brother-in-law, very deeply embedded in the matrix, I would say. He's a lawyer at a nice firm out of near Boston, and just, Red Sox, raising his family, just fully in it, does a great job as a lawyer, as a husband, all of that. But pretty much, we just got back from some holiday things, and it's usually a very typical conversation. This year went slightly off the reservation for him, where he said, I don't know who to trust anymore. It's like I have to read every article and know who owns the newspaper and who the actual journalist is and what their bias is. He's like, I don't know who to trust anymore.
You've ruined him.
Right?
You've ruined him.
Yeah, by the time the media is losing him, I'm telling you, they are so far off the reservation. Now, this should be a time for the media to do some good, old-fashioned, soul-searching, mirror-peering, right? What's happening here? How did we get the Trump thing so wrong? How did we lead people astray? How did we sit in our echo chambers and tell ourselves fantasies? Why are our numbers so disappointing economically in terms of revenue and profits? What's going on? This would be a great moment. And instead, the campaign they're running with is, well, we're so far down in the swamp. Let's see if we can just drag our competition down here with us. Let's brand them fake news. I was like, let's not elevate our game. Let's bring everybody else down, right? It's just such a failed strategy. Like if somebody walked into my executive office and said, here's our strategy. Our product sucks so bad. We're going to point out that our competitor's product must suck as bad as ours. Even though people prefer it and blind taste tests over and over again, we're going to try and convince people that's not the case, right? What a shitty strategy. I just hardly know what to say.
Let me tell you, I've made the mistake, and I knew when I was doing it that it was going to happen this way. But I started watching a little bit of news, and the damn stuff is addictive. I mean, I don't watch too much, but I'm listening. I've got satellite radio in my car, and I started listening to the news. Don't do it. It's like you should, if you're going to ingest news, only do it by reading, because that is the most controllable way. Because otherwise, when you get news, when you intake it, when you're doing it through senses other than reading, which is visual, when you're doing it through video or audio, it bypasses your critical functions in your brain. I mean, I know there's been studies on this, and you're much less able to filter it. It just somehow, your critical facilities are shut off when you're getting it that way. There's a passivity about getting information when you don't read it, even down to audiobooks, which I love. It's different when you take an audiobook in than when you read a book. And I've got to stop doing this because it's really bad. And your emotions get triggered much more easily by audio and video than they do by the printed page. I mean, you can still start screaming when you're reading a bad thing, a bad story. But when it's video, it's just an instant trigger. Audio, a little bit less so. But if it's skillfully done, and hey, you and I know how to do it. This is what we do for a living. We can trigger people just as well, let's face it. But hey, at least our hearts are in the right place. But these people, look, the old stereotype of a newsman being an alcoholic, just going for the low-hanging fruit. Hey, there are watering holes where the old-fashioned news guys used to go and just drink. That's what they did. And you would just give them stories, just lay them on their lap. They didn't have to do any work. They're lazy. They are just lazy. They're very intellectually numb, incurious. They don't want to know what the real story is, and this is why they're being rejected and basically repudiated. This election, Chris, the political orthodoxy has been repudiated, and so is the media. I just wonder what they're going to look like come the next election.
So many great points in there, Kerry. Let me start here, which is, first, nobody should feel bad because you can't resist the programming that news is trying to insert in you, because look, we're humans, and the media knows this, and not the media. I'm not talking about the just trying to get through the day drunk reporter who's just lazy as all hell. I'm talking about the people who are actually running the machine. They know humans really well. This whole idea of programming humans is a field of study that began way back around 1900 and really kicked into gear with the work of Freud and his nephew Bernays and propaganda in the 1920s, and it's only gotten better. So here's some things we know about ourselves as organisms. One is that we only have so much willpower. Right now, the food industry uses this against us constantly. Like you don't have to overcome an infinite amount of willpower. All you have to overcome is people's daily allotment of willpower, and you're in, right? So here's the thing. There's only so much you can resist. I had NPR on for about 5 minutes yesterday, and I had to turn it right back off again because in one sentence, I had so many things I had to resist and refute that it was overwhelming, and they were gonna run me out. And the sentence went something like this, which was, well, the Republican National Council, actually, their security foiled Russian hackers. And of course, we're talking about the same Russia that annexed Crimea. Click. I had to turn it off because there's just so much wrong with this, which was, first of all, let's unpack it. The RNC security didn't foil anything. There were some phishing attacks that came in. Sometimes that's Nigerians. Sometimes it's Koreans. Sometimes it's the kid next door in New Jersey. There's no ownership to these phishing attacks where somebody's attempting to get your password. These are happening literally thousands, if not millions of times every single day. Right? Yeah. And it's people all over the globe. It's pretty much anybody with access to the internet. So we don't know that it was Russian hackers that the security was foiled at the RNC, but they foiled something. They found a phishing attack and they terminated it. That's great. I bet they found another one this morning too from somewhere. Right? So there was no evidence that it was Russians, but that was just to try and pile on. Like now that we've already established it was Russians earlier who hacked the DNC, let's not pay attention to what they found when the stuff got released. Let's try and pretend that who released it matters rather than what was in the email. Forget all that. And then the second piece to then link that and say, oh, and of course, Russia annexed Crimea, unforgivable sin. Like, whoa, back up, people. Now, remember, people of Crimea voted, over 95% voted to rejoin Russia, which only makes sense because Crimea used to belong to Russia. They're Russian speakers. And by the way, the thugs, the actual legitimate Nazi SS Waffen-wearing insignia thugs in Kiev, had said openly that they would love to terminate, destroy, annihilate, genocide all the Russian-speaking people. So the fact that a group of people who live in a Crimean peninsula decided to not stay with those people and join their native, colleagues who aren't seeking to destroy them, will also share their culture and language, was probably one of the most democratic things that has happened in the last 50 years, right? Bloodless, people voting what they wanted, right? But look at how much I had to resist in that one sentence. And the second sentence would have been just as full of stuff that was crap. And so would have the third and fourth. And by the 10th sentence, I'm just like, I can't handle this anymore. How do I possibly resist so much out of context, illogical, wrong, provenly wrong, context-free information in a row? And that's the world we live in.
Yeah, it was a little bit loaded, huh? Just a little.
Just a little.
Oh, my God. Yeah, well, they don't stop. It's remarkable. They just keep going and going and going, and where it stops. But they're losing the game though. That's the amazing thing. They're really losing it, and it's shocking that anyone still buys into anything they say. I mean, there's people that buy the New York Times, right? I mean, they still buy it.
Yeah, and they still believe it, more importantly.
Yeah.
And it goes on and on and on. So here's the thing, like this whole idea, even if they say, well, first off, I love how Jim Kunstler put it in his piece this morning. He said, Hillary keeps repeating this idea that 17 security agencies all agree that it was Russia doing the hacking. I'm like, whoa, 17? There's 17 now? Because I can only name 6. Who are the other 11? Right? Nobody knows, right? There must be other agencies out there sniffing through all of our electronic underwear on a daily basis, right? And they've all come to this agreement. But if they all agree, then they must have some data or some evidence. So 0 evidence has been promoted so far. I've only seen one tiny piece of the earliest thing where James Clapper came out and said, oh, yeah, we traced it to a server in Russia. Mm-hmm. Listen, anybody who knows anything about how this game is played knows that anybody who's sophisticated enough to want to try and do some hacking knows how to cover their tracks. And more to the point, all of these state agents have the capability of creating false electronic tracks anywhere and anytime they want to.
Yeah, of course. It's Spy 101, really.
Yeah.
Our guys can do it. Anyone could do it. There's not even a question. Anyone can do it. We know this for sure. So where does this leave us here? I mean, less faith in government? Are they going to delegitimize Trump by this? What's going to be the net result here, Chris?
Well, look, I hate to put it this way, but the trend is absolutely clear at this point in time. The powers that be, the big government status sorts, they truly believe a number of things. First, they believe that the little people are a bunch of morons and can't be trusted, right? And we've seen this repeated over and over again. When they don't like the outcome of an election, they always say, oh my God, people voted against their best interests. What a bunch of deplorable idiots. How could they possibly vote to leave the EU? Don't they realize what a wonderful thing it is having faceless bureaucrats in Brussels shove rulings down your throat? Like here's one, just to give you an idea. Like you must be an ignorant boob to have lived in the UK and said, I don't want the EU passing rules on us. Now, remember, the EU in 2005 passed a rule that prevented a water company selling bottled water from making the claim on their water bottle that their product was useful as a hydrating agent for you to drink.
Yeah.
That's an illegal claim. The company hadn't proved it, and the EU said we can't allow that. You're saying stuff that we can't allow. And not only, there wasn't like a temporary, we have to think about this. That ban has been in place for 11 years. This company has not been allowed to make the claim that their water is useful for rehydrating or creating or hydrating you, right?
It's insane.
That's just an example. Thousands of rules like that come out, including the poor people of Greece, which is like, oh, I know you're first across the Mediterranean and all these people, these refugees are landing on your shores. A, you have to accept them. B, no money for you. C, you have to pay back all those loans that our banks actually quote air quotes gave to you, but really never left our banks.
Right.
In Frankfurt, they just went from server A to server B, but they're attached to your name, Greece. And D, you're going to have to sell off all your assets. The real stuff that are the real
islands.
things of your
country. Sell off all the islands. Liquidate the country. Just liquidate it.
Do all of that. Why wouldn't you? Must be a deplorable boob not to want to be part of that system.
Sounds
right?
Great. It sounds great. Why wouldn't you?
I don't know. So this is the piece. So it's really, this is a great moment in history to be alive, because what's happening is very clearly that the ruling elites have really gotten too far over the tips of their skis. They have their own little echo chambers. They all talk to themselves. They can't understand the larger massive history, but it's this simple. The world economy is not growing like it used to. We still have the appearance of growth because of all the debt we're printing, but we're now printing upwards of $8 of debt to get $1 of legitimate GDP growth, where it used to be closer to 2 to 1. When we create all of that debt, of course, that gets saddled all over the system. It gets saddled onto the people. We're seeing the inability of the system now to generate enough wealth for everybody. And here's the problem. The way the system is constructed with debt-based money is, and this is just a feature of the system, I'm not going to moralize about it, but the feature of the system is that it accelerates at an exponential pace the accumulation of wealth towards a fewer and fewer set of entities. And I could build this spreadsheet and show you how this works. It's really not complex, but that's exactly what's been happening. 400 families or entities now own as much as 3.5 billion people on the planet. And that inequity creates friction. It creates social friction. Of course it does. Of course. Plutarch, several thousand years ago, said the most oldest and fatal ailment of all republics is an imbalance between the rich and the poor. Mm-hmm. Well, we've got a pretty fantastic imbalance between the rich and the poor. And all the elites can think to do is scream, fake news, Russian hackers. We must have lost because something. Like, no, you lost because your policies are screwing people. And if you think you didn't like the results of this election, you're going to hate what this looks like in 10 years when these people don't just push a no button on a voting screen, but when they pick up a pitchfork and say, now we're really done with this.
Yeah, well, we're getting closer and closer to this, boy. And you just got to wonder. I mean, I don't have any wonderful hopes that Trump is going to totally reform the system, because I think it's beyond reform. And what is going to do with all this debt? Sell off all the assets of the U.S. government? I just don't see that happening. But it sure is fun to watch. I will say that.
Well, any change to the system that promises to upend some of the status quo, I think, is welcome at this point in time. And I don't know that there is a way to do it elegantly. I think there's always a bit of a smash to go with it. I hope it just doesn't turn into another smash and grab by Trump's people instead of other people. But we have an opening. We have an opening where there's the possibility of having a real conversation and saying, wait a minute, what's really been happening? Is this really the direction we want to go? And this is the truly deplorable part of this story for me, is that the mainstream media, instead of saying, what happened? How should we look at this? Is there another conversation we should be having? They're doubling down on the old story, which is the party politics of divide and conquer. If we can just get people, screaming at each other, it was Russia, it wasn't Russia, I don't even want to have that conversation. I'm not interested in it. It has no bearing on this story one way or the other, right? Mm-hmm. Or even to this level of saying, oh, Hillary would have done better, Trump's going to do better. Still, it's beyond any one person at this point in time. We have to have a deeper conversation. And every company, Kerry, that I used to consult for when I was a management consultant, I was on the strategy side, so I think this way. If a company didn't have a good strategy, they died on the vine, because a strategy is simply saying, where are we trying to go? How are we going to get there? Right? Yeah. What's the vision? What are our resources? You always have more vision than resources. So it takes a careful balance to say, here's where we'd like to go, and here's what we need to do to get there. Mm-hmm. This country has no vision at this point in time. And I'm sorry for anybody listening, who's offended by this, because I'll offend both sides. Stronger together is not a vision. It's a description of a group of people, potentially, right? Make America great again is kind of a retrospective view. And, if we're saying we loved how it was in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, or whatever period you want to go back to, those conditions will never exist again. It's a whole new world for a lot of reasons. So make America great again is not a vision unless it's attached to And here's how. So you need a really comprehensive energy policy. You need an overhaul of the justice system because it's an injustice system at this point in time.
Sure.
We have to badly, deeply rethink education because we're educating factory workers for factories that no longer exist, on and on and on, right? So if we had a compelling vision that says, hey, here's the world, 7.5 billion people going to 9.5, fossil fuels running out, we need some pretty comprehensive policies to manage that. And that's what's missing. That's making me personally a little uncomfortable because I'm like, damn, any company without a good vision is doomed, period. So why is a country any different?
Yeah, we have no vision. Well, I would say that Trump does have a vision. I'm not sure about his means for bringing it about, but he's starting to, I don't know, he's starting to bring this thing together with his cabinet. So, we'll have to stay tuned. Do I believe he can execute it? I think the winds are definitely at his sails. He's sailing into the choppy water. I wrote an article a few weeks ago, the Black Swan president. He got in there as a black swan, and his whole administration is going to be judged as a reaction to external events, not as, him executing his policies as other presidents may have been in the past. It'll be putting out one fire after the next. That's the way this thing is going to unfold here. Not, he did such a good job cleaning up the Justice Department, and now he's to the EPA and the Energy Department. No, that's not the way it's going to unfold. So, hey, let's see what happens. Anyway, Chris, best place to find your work?
I want people to go to peakprosperity.com, and there you'll find a lot of free information. I have a subscription newsletter for people who like to go deeper, and we've got a great video series and book out on something called the Crash Course, which gives all the context people need to understand why all of this was actually fairly predictable, and want to know how the future is going to unfold.
Very. All right, and you'll find a link to Chris's site on our site, the show notes to this interview, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. By the way, if you have any comments, questions, criticisms, just send us an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. That's kl@kerrylutz.com. Reduced schedule for this week, so don't be too disappointed, but I'm sure you've got lots of family obligations, company and travel and all that. We're traveling off to Cuba, going to do a little project, man on the street interviews with Cubans, since my son Brandon is fluent in Spanish. Basically just asking man on the street message to President-elect Donald Trump. Hey, what do you want him to do about Cuban-American relations? What's your opinion on it? Because really, Trump's pullback on Cuban relations, it's just going to be a disaster for the Cuban people. Hey, I like getting legal Cuban cigars for a change and good Cuban rum because it's so much better than any other rum in the world. And there's sugar. Chris, you wouldn't believe that sugar could be better from some places in the world than others, but Cuban sugar is the best in the world. That's why their mojitos are the best. So all those important issues we're going to address, Chris, on our trip to Cuba this week. So stay tuned. Hey, have a great holiday. Happy New Year to you and yours, Chris. And we'll talk to you next year.
Thank you, Kerry, and likewise. Bye-bye.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.